Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the quadratic formula. Just so you know, all the methods we've used, square root method, factoring, perfect squares, completing the square, all of that stuff, those are all methods to solving quadratic equations. The quadratic formula is actually the universal formula you can use for every single quadratic equation. So let's say that you were having trouble, you still have trouble with factoring, or you're having trouble with completing the square, or you're having trouble with the square root method. This formula that we're going to go over for today, you could actually use it 100% of the time with 100% of the quadratic equations. So let's go ahead and look at this one. So your quadratic formula, it's telling you that it has to be in standard form. So that means you have to have ax squared plus bx plus c. Everything has to be on the same side equal to 0. If it's not, then you cannot use this formula. So again, this formula is like the formula to use for every quadratic equation that exists in the world. So let's say, like I said, so let's say you don't know how to complete the square, and I tell you solve this quadratic formula, and you have no idea how to complete the square, you don't remember, the quadratic formula will always give you the right answer. So number 2, you're going to identify A, B, C, and substitute them into the formula, and then simplify. So let's start off. Number 1, is this in standard form? It is, so we're good. And now I'm going to identify my A. My A is a 1 because this right here is 1. My B is a positive 2. And my C is a negative 63. Okay, so that has to be identified. Now I'm going to go ahead and substitute into this formula. So it's negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC divided by 2A. So I'm going to substitute this, okay? So in place of B is 2. So this is going to be negative 2 because the formula is negative, plus or minus. And then I'm going to put 2 squared again because your B is 2. This right here, the B is 2, so 2 squared. Minus 4 times your A times your C. All over 2 times A. Now, you can do this on the calculator. But if you're doing this on the calculator, you're going to have to make sure to put the parentheses. You have to put parentheses 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 63. So now let's go ahead and solve this. So this is going to give me negative 2 plus or minus 4. 2 squared is 4. Minus, you're going to do what is 4 times 1. Or think about it as negative 4 because there's a negative here. So I'm going to do on my calculator negative 4. Okay, negative 4 times 1 times negative 63. That's going to give me a positive 252. All over 2. Now I'm going to go ahead and do 252 plus 4. That's 256. I'm going to continue over here. And if I check, is 256 a perfect square? So I'm going to check, is 256? And it is. The square root of 256 is 16. So negative 2 plus or minus 16 over 2. Notice how you have the whole 2 cases again that we were working with last week. You're going to have negative 2 plus 16 over 2. And then you're also going to have negative 2 minus 16 over 2. So the first one would be positive 14 divided by 2 will be 7. The second one will be negative 18 divided by 2 will be negative 9. So then your answers here would be 7 and negative 9. Okay? So I'm going to do a few more with you. Alright, let's do number 2 now. Okay, number 2. Again, I'm going to identify my letters. But first I'm going to check, is it in standard form? So A, B, C equals 0, so we're good. Now your A here is 6. Your B is a negative 11 because this 11 is negative. And your C is also a negative 10. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put this into the formula. So we have negative B plus or minus the square root of, or b squared, the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So now let's substitute this. Okay, so negative b, I'm going to look over here. What's my b? My b is negative 11. But this is already a negative b, which means you're going to have negative 11. Okay, because your formula requires a negative, but your b is already a negative, so this will be positive. But I'm writing it so you guys can see. Parentheses, negative 11 squared minus 4a and your c. All over 2 times a, which is 6. Okay, we're going to keep cleaning this up. Alright, so this is going to give me 11 plus or minus the square root. Negative 11 squared is 121. 121. Now I'm going to do this on the calculator. I'm going to do negative 4 times 6 times negative 10. Okay, so you're going to have your negative 4 times 6 times negative 10. That's going to give me a positive 240 all over 12. Now I'm going to add 240 plus 121. That's going to give me 361. So I'm going to write it over here. 361 all over 12. Now you need to check, is the 361 a perfect square? Because if it is, I want to use that. And it is. So the 361 is 19. So now you have 11 plus or minus 19 divided by 12. You're going to have two cases. So for the first case, I'll write it up here or down here. I'm going to have 11 plus 19 divided by 12. So that's going to give me 30 divided by 12. And we can simplify this by 6. So this is going to give me 5 over 2, which checks out with 5 over 2 over here. And I'm going to do the second case. My second case is 11 minus 19 all over 12. So that's going to give me negative 8 over 12. Divide it to simplify it. I'm going to be left with negative 2 over 3, which checks out with the negative 2 over 3 here. Alright, let's keep going. I'm going to do number 3 now. Okay, so for number 3, same thing, you have to make sure that it's in standard form, so I'm going to have to subtract the 1 here. Okay, so I'm going to be left with negative x squared plus 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. I'm going to identify everything. My a is negative 1, my b is 2, and my c is negative 1. Okay, you have to be very careful with that. Now my equation is negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now I'm going to go ahead and substitute everything in. So I'm going to be left with negative b, but my b is positive, which means it's just one negative. So negative 2 plus or minus 2 squared minus 4a and c. So I have a whole bunch of negatives there. Divided by 2 times your a. So all I'm doing here is substituting. So this is going to give me negative 2 plus or minus 4. And then you're going to have your negative 4 times your negative 1 times your negative 1, which is going to give you a negative 4 all over negative 2. But 4 minus 4 is 0. Okay, so negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 0. That's 0, which is going to give me negative 2 plus or minus 0 over negative 2. So I have two cases again. Negative 2 plus 0 over negative 2. That's going to give me positive 1. And then my other case, negative 2 minus 0 over negative 2. This will also give me positive 1, which is why it's just 1 for my answer. Okay. Alright, I'm going to do number 4 now. First, set it into standard form. This is not in standard form, so I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. and I'm going to add 15 to both sides over here. So I'm going to be left with negative 2x squared minus x plus 15 is equal to 0. Okay, so I moved my stuff. Now identify your values. A is negative 2, B is negative 1, and C is 15. We're going to go ahead and substitute this in to negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So that's my formula. I'm going to substitute it in. Now your b here is negative, and so is this one, so that's going to be your negative 1, which will turn into a positive, but I'll write it for now. Negative 1 plus or minus negative 1 squared minus 4a for negative 2 and c for 15 all over 2 times negative 2 for a. So I'm going to clean this up now. So this is going to give me a positive 1, okay, because negative times a negative will be positive 1, plus or minus negative 1 squared is 1. Now you're going to do negative 4 right here times negative 2 times 15, and that's going to give you a positive 120 all over negative 4. But 1 plus 120 is 121. 121. And 121 is a perfect square. That's 11. So you're going to have 1 plus or minus 11 over negative 4. So now you have two cases. Okay, your first case is going to be 1. So we're going to have 1 plus 11 over negative 4. That's going to give you 12 over negative 4. That's going to give you negative 3. Checks out. The second case is 1 minus 11 over negative 4. This is negative 10 over negative 4. Divide by 2. And you're left with 5 over 2. It's actually negative 5 over negative 2, but a negative divided by a negative is positive. So you're left with 5 over 2. Alright, I'm going to do the next one. Number 5, it has to be in standard form, and it's not. So I'm going to subtract 24 to both sides. This is going to give me 9x squared minus 25 is equal to 0. Now I need to find out my values. My value here is a is 9. Now your b here, notice how this is your a, and that's your c, which means your b is 0, because you don't have a b, and your c is negative 25. That's really important that you're able to notice that. In this case over here, this was our a, our b, our c. This is your a, this is your c. You're missing a b, because you don't have an x term. This is x squared, and that's no term. Alright, so now from there, let's go ahead and substitute into the formula. Negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So now I'm going to go ahead and substitute these in. Now my negative b is already 0. So if I put negative 0, it's not going to change anything, so I'm just going to leave it at 0. Plus or minus 0 squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I'm going to be left with 0 plus or minus, so I don't really need that. And then, I mean, if you want to, you can write it. And then it's going to be 0. Then you're going to do minus 4 times 9 times negative 25. That's going to give you positive 900 all over 18. Now 900 plus 0 is just 900. So I'm going to have 0 plus or minus 900 over 18. Now the 900 is a perfect square, and it's 30. 0 plus or minus 30 over 18. You're going to have two cases here. 0 plus 30 over 18. And then you're also going to have 0 minus 30 over 18. Okay. 0 plus 30 is just 30. So you're going to have 30 divided by 18. You're going to have to divide those to simplify. So if I divide by 6, this will give me 5/3. If I divide by 6 again, I get negative 5/3. So that's why we get plus and minus 5/3. Okay? Whoops. Plus or minus 5/3. Alright, number 6. Now we have 8x squared plus 10. I'm not going to do this one. You guys will do this one, but I'm going to help you out by setting it up. So first things first, set it in standard form. So I'm going to be left with 8x squared minus 10x is equal to 0. Now identify your terms. A is 8. Your B is negative 10. Whoops. But your C this time is 0. Because that's your A, that's your B. Your C, you don't have a C, so it's 0. So you're going to go ahead and substitute this into the formula of negative B plus or minus B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So you're going to go ahead and substitute these values, and then it'll give you 0 and 5/4. Alright. Okay, let's look at these. I'm only going to do some of these. Okay, I'm going to do, probably going to do number 7. Or I'll do number 8 and number 9. Alright, so make sure it's in standard form. So minus 8x plus 1 minus 8x plus 1. Now, the negative 2x squared I can't combine with anything. But then in the negative 8x I also can't combine with anything. But the 1 and the 17 I can combine, so I'll be left with 18. And then these will be 0. So now my A is negative 2, my B is negative 8, and my C is 18. So you're going to substitute this into the formula. Negative B plus or minus B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Alright, so my B here is going to be a negative 8. But it's already a negative 8. So I'm going to stop writing it like I usually do. If that's negative and that's negative, then this is B is going to be a positive 8. So I'm going to move that already. And then negative 8 squared minus 4AC all over 2A. All I'm doing is substituting. I'm going to be left with 8 plus or minus 64. Because negative 8 times negative 8. Now we're going to figure out this. So take your calculator, negative 4. So negative 4 times a negative 2 times an 18 will give you a positive 144. And this will be negative 4. So the 144 plus 64 is going to give you 208. So 208. Now 208 is not a perfect square. Okay. So because it's not a perfect square, you're gonna have to simplify that square root. So we have to figure out from 208 what we have. So for 208, I'm gonna do it off to the side over here. 208. It's 13 times 16. The 16 is a perfect square. The 13 is not. So that's what we have so far. Notice how it does not look like what we have here. And that's okay. So now you're going to have to simplify this. Okay? So write it out separately. So I'm going to have our 8 plus... we have our 8 over negative 4, and then plus or minus the 4 square root of 13 over negative 4. Now the 8 over negative 4 will turn into a negative 2. So negative 2. And now this 4 divided by 4, that cancels out to just 1. But because this negative already lives here, we don't have to keep writing it. So we'll just have plus or minus the square root of 13. And that's what we have here. Okay. Alright. I'm going to do... Now this this work right here is all part of 8, by the way. Alright, I'm going to do, let's do 9. Alright, so make it in standard form. So I'm going to minus the 4. I'm left with negative 8x squared plus 3 is equal to 0. Find your values. My b is 0 because I don't have a b, and my c is 3. So now negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Okay, so now let's substitute in our values. Our b is 0 already, so 0 plus or minus 0 squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Whoops. Let's clean this up. 0 plus or minus 0, and then you have negative 4 times negative 8 times 3. That's going to give you 96 all over negative 16. Now 0 plus 96, this 0 here, we don't need it anymore, so I'm not going to write it. Now the square root of 96, that is not a perfect square. So you're going to have to try and clean it up. So 96, I'm going to do the work somewhere off to the side. I have 16 and 6. 16 is a perfect square. 6 is not. Oh, sorry, don't forget your plus and minus. We still have plus and minus all over negative 16. But the 4 and the 16, there's nothing to split up like we split it up over here because we have a 0. The 0 over here does not matter, okay? So now we have 4 divided by negative 16. This turns into a 1, that turns into a 4. But this negative right here already lives here, which means you don't have to count it twice. So our answer would be plus or minus the square root of 6 over 4. Okay. Alright, let's move on. Okay. Alright, so for number 11 and 12, I'll probably do both. We'll see. Alright, let's look at number 11. So same thing, move things around. I don't have to move anything. It's already in standard form. Identify your values. A is negative 3, B is 8, and C is negative 7. So now go ahead and your formula. Okay, I'm going to substitute it. My B is negative here in the formula, but it's not negative there, which means it'll stay with my negative 8 plus or minus. Actually, let's do it over here. Negative 8 plus or minus 8 squared minus 4ac. Now I do have some negatives there that I need to keep accounted. So now I have negative 3. Okay, so I'm going to solve this. Negative 8 plus or minus 64. Now you're going to have the negative 4. So negative 4 times negative 3 times negative 7 is going to be negative 84 all over negative 6. Now you're going to do 64 minus 84. That's going to give me negative 20 all over negative 6. But remember, negative 20 is, first of all, there's a negative there. Second of all, 20 is not a perfect square. But you can rewrite this as negative 8 plus or minus I square root of 20 over negative 6. Now, let's see if we can break down 20. We have 4 and 5. 4 is a perfect square. So this is going to be negative 8 plus or minus 4I square root of 5 over negative 6. Now notice how there's two things going on here. I'm going to have to separate them to get my 2k to figure out the simplified version. So I'm going to write negative 8 over negative 6. And then I'm going to write plus and minus 4I square root of 5 over negative 6. So I'm going to simplify these. Divide them by 2. Now this is going to give me a 4 and a 3. Now negative divided by a negative is positive, so I get positive 4/3. Now the 4 and the 6, same thing, I'm going to divide it by 2. This is going to give me 2 over 3. Whoops. Sorry, not 2 over 3. This should not be a 4. That should be a 2. Because the square root of 4 is 2. So that was my bad. Alright. So let's simplify this again. So I'm going to simplify by 2. I'm going to be left with 1i square root of 5 over 3. But remember, this negative already lives here, which means I don't have to rewrite it again. So I'm going to actually erase the 1 because I don't need it. And I'm going to include the plus and minus. So now if I put it back together, this is going to be 4 plus or minus I square root of 5 over 3, which is how we get this. Okay. Alright. Number 12, I'll help you get started, but I'm not going to do all of it. So I'm going to subtract 4x, subtract 4x, subtract 5, subtract 5. So I have 5x squared because I can't combine anything. Now the negative 4x I can't combine with anything either, but the 9 minus 5 I can. And this is going to be your new equation. My a equals 5, my b equals negative 4, and my c equals 4. So go ahead and do the formula. B squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Plug it in and then start working from there. I'm not going to do any of the notes, by the way. Sorry, not the notes. The homework, since I basically did most of these. Actually, let me finish 12 for you, since I'm not going to do any of the homework ones for you, but I am providing the key. Alright, so b, negative b. My b is negative 4, so that means that this negative and that negative make a positive 4. I have negative 4 squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This is going to be left with 4 plus or minus 16, and then you're going to do negative 4 times 5 times 4. That's going to give you negative 80 all over 10. Now 16 minus 80 is negative 64. So 4 plus or minus negative 64 over 10. But remember that the negative is an I, so I'm going to take that I out. Now the 64 is a perfect square, which is 8. So 8i over 10. Now I'm going to have to rewrite them separately here. Okay, I'm going to have 4 over 10 plus or minus 8i over 10. Let's simplify this. Divided by 2. That's going to give me 2/5 plus or minus divided by 2. That's going to give me 4i over 5. Now let's combine them because the denominators are the same. 2 plus or minus 4i over 5. And that's the same thing. Okay. Alright, go ahead and finish the homework.